Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to introduce my beautiful guest onto the show today. Her name is Jem from Soul Soma, and formerly known as Jem Lee Holistic Healing. And Jem guides soul-led women to break through self-doubt, embrace visibility, and step into their true power. So welcome to the show, lovely.
Hi, so good to be here, Shelby. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. I feel like this is overdue. Like, was it like at the start of the year or there was some time and I messaged you and I was just like, we need to connect on the potty. And then the listeners know that I kind of ghosted the podcast this year unintentionally. And so I feel like you're such a beautiful guest to kind of have back in like early on when I'm like fully ready to commit back to the potty. So I'm so excited.
Oh my gosh, I feel so honored. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay. So I would love for you just to start the podcast by telling everyone where you're tuning in from.
Beautiful. Well, let's start with where I'm tuning in from within my body right now. So there's always a little
Mm.
bit of, anxiety when we do this kind of thing, and we're showing up and we're putting ourselves out there to be seen and to be visible. And so, yeah, just here in my body right now, there's like a little bit of electricity, a little bit of tingling, but feeling really rooted and grounded here on this beautiful Ghana land here in Adelaide in Marina, SA. And yeah, just in my little home studio.
Oh, beautiful. I've never had anyone answer that question like that, like about their physical body, which I
Mm.
love. And you guys will learn later on that's literally why I have Jem on the podcast, because I want to talk about the connection to the body and like how to like that was your initial like instinct to answer that question that way because you're so in tune with your body, which I think a lot of us aren't. And normally people just say, I'm from Adelaide or I'm in rah rah rah. Like for you, that was your first instinct, which I just love and admire about you.
Yeah, I often find that also, like, if I speak into what it is that I'm feeling, that is just what eases the tension straight away. But it's just, like, this is my home, this is my body, this is where I'm
Mm,
coming to you from.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I would love for you to tell us a little bit about you and your journey, which led you into this field of work, and also what it is that you do and offer in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with Soul and Soma, it really is just I'm a guide to help people find their way home to themselves, really. It's just been the most natural progression into this space. I started off in this field studying naturopathy, and then I realized that I really liked the counseling side of things. And if I continued to study at the rate that I was going at, I was like, I'm not going to be done until I'm like 40 years old. I really want to get into the healing arts sooner rather than later. So I found this holistic counseling course that just sang to me, and
Mm.
I started doing that. And then a couple of years later, I finished and launched my business, and it's been such an incredible growth process, like launching a business. You think you're going to just come in and just be a counselor, and you're going to find and meet clients really easily. And what I found is that it's such a like a spiritual experience. Like really, it's such a growth experience. It's you don't just be a counselor, or you don't be just be somebody to hold space for someone. You are a marketing person, you are an admin person, you are a business person. And originally, when I started thinking about this, when you think about a business person, for me, I personally imagine like a man in a suit. And so I had to do all this work around like letting go of that visual and redefining how I do business, and creating like this whole new experience of how do I hold space for people, and how do I hold space for myself and protect myself in that experience as well.
Oh, wow.
It's a long
It's so
story.
no, it's beautiful. And I think it's so relatable to so many of like my clients who are business owners and especially women in business as well. Like I think
Yeah.
especially when you're creating a business from such a heart-centered space, it's always hard as well to like put a monetary value on that because it's like I wish we could give it for free. And like, I know we've had
Mm,
conversations before about, yeah, like people
mm,
booking in and, making sure that you can pay your bills and things like that. And it's like, it's so hard because we love what we do and we're so passionate about holding space. But yeah, you have to do, like, I definitely didn't realize all the hats you have to wear, like opening a
mm,
business. Like, I
mhm.
was so naive in that I thought, yeah, I could just be like a therapist for people and that was that. And then you actually start and it's like, oh wow, there's a lot of hats you got to wear.
So many hats, so many hats. And I just, I think at the start I was like very overwhelmed by it all, but now I've really
Mm,
embraced it and opened up to it. And, I've just always said that I'll be learning things for the rest of my life. And
mm,
this is just part of it. And it's a really cool thing to experience and get to create a life on our terms. Like, really, that's why we're here doing it, right? Is not only to
mhm,
help people in their experiences, but so that we can create a life that feels really abundant and freeing and restful and open.
mm.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Is beautiful. And I think as well, like when you run a business, like you have to detach from the ego. Cause I know for me, like even recently, like moving from my like space in Sterling and
Mm,
not knowing my next steps yet, which is a blessing. I'm so grateful to have some time to work from home and just see online clients instead of in person and give back to myself. But there was like a literal, I would say like a year of me
mm,
resisting, knowing that Sterling wasn't in alignment for me anymore, but feeling so much attachment and judgment from like perceived judgment from other people, but it was definitely from myself of like,
mm,
oh, they're going to think that the business is failing if I move from the
mm,
hills, or, everything that I've done in the last 4 years has been a waste. And like, all of these silly narratives that felt so real, but actually no one around me was thinking that. And every time I told people like, oh, I'm like not renewing the lease at Sterling, they're like, cool, where are you going next? And
yes.
I'm like, what, like, is that it? Like, and I spoke to one of my
Yeah.
best friends about it and she's like, babe, like to you it's a really big deal, like to
Mm,
us it's just like, okay, where can I book in,
yeah.
and so I
Yeah.
think like even like going through evolution and change as a human, but also
Mm.
when it translates to your business, like that was a huge piece for me as well.
Yes, yes. I think that navigating uncertainty and change is like one of the biggest themes of my year this year.
Mm,
And you're so right. Like, we just get so caught up in our internal stories if we're not careful and we're not watching it. And even if we are watching it, it happens anyway. So
mm,
that beautiful little bit of grace and compassion you can give yourself when it pops up, it goes a really long way. And also, I think your honesty, like in
mm.
coming forth and saying, like, I'm doing this thing, I'm changing this thing, instead of like sweeping it under the rug and hiding it, or, being afraid to tell people what's going on for you. When you're honest, you realize that other people's perception of what it might be is just so completely different to what your fears and your worry thoughts are telling you.
That's
Yeah.
so true. Like even in the beginning of this episode, like you mentioning, what you're feeling in your body, like it's that same sort of thing. Like you said, as soon as you like just even just hold space for that part of
Mm,
you,
mm,
it diminishes that anxiety or that like shadow aspect, which I'm so excited to dive into
mm,
later on in the episode. But a reason that I really wanted to connect with you, as I mentioned, is because you bring so much into the work that you do with your clients about like body and movement and
mm,
somatics, and how healing from our conscious mind is only one part of the puzzle piece. And I think you and I are very similar because I come from a psychology background where I thought
mm.
that was like
Yeah.
the end all, and I realized through my own healing journey that that was only like part of it. Like, yes, obviously you need to be able to consciously understand and also hold that space to articulate what happens, but that's not the only type of
Mm,
healing. So I would love to bring into the conversation somatics, body work,
yeah.
energy work, all the things.
Yes, amazing. Absolutely. Well, I guess I'll give you a little bit more of an answer to that initial question of like how I got into what I'm doing, because I did holistic counseling and I realized there was a big piece missing of the puzzle, was that I wasn't trauma informed. And I felt like there was, people coming to me saying, I have this big trauma. And I literally had to say, like, I don't have the tools. I'm not equipped to deal with this. I'm going to refer you on to someone else. And I was like, no, I want to be able to be here to hold that. Like, I've never been one to shy away from the big, the heavy, the painful things for myself and for holding for anyone else. And so I yeah, sort of went down this path of like, how do I become trauma informed? And then as I moved down that path and continued to study, I came across embodied processing and this somatic therapy, which is essentially like understanding that our body keeps the score. You know, we've all seen the book, but really understanding the approach of healing of it's not just a cognitive thing. Like our bodies hold onto so many emotional imprints, memories, and experiences from this time, this lifetime, and actually up to 14 generations of ancestral
Mm-hmm.
trauma can be stored in our bodies as well. So when we move into the body, we really begin to heal on such a deeper level and on a more holistic level, you know, where we're really undoing layers and layers and layers of generational stuff. I can't even think of the word here. When we move into the body, and it's become like a real foundation for everything that I do, is creating a safe space for every client when we start off working together, is helping them move into their bodies. Most of us are disconnected and desensitized and dissociated. And so the process of actually getting to know how to move from the head, how to move from the mind down, just a little bit further down the neck into the heart, just to begin with, is a beautiful landing space. And a lot of us have a really, really hard shell and walls built up around our hearts as a protective mechanism. And we can work with that too. And that's really special when we can start to like melt those away and welcome those parts in. It's all important, and I don't even know where to begin talking about it really. So
It's
that was a
such
great
a
question.
huge
Hopefully it answered a little bit of it.
Absolutely. I didn't help you out much by just being like, can we talk about that? Like, where do we
No.
start? But it's so true. Like, I often think, look how big the body is compared to the mind. It's like natural that we're going to find little nooks and crannies to kind of push
Mm,
things down and suppress
mm,
things into. And I think as well, like, obviously, there's a time and place for everything. Like, sometimes you have to disconnect from what you're going through to an extent to cope and to survive,
mm,
and like I always say to my clients, like you want to give so much grace to that part of you that maybe created that mechanism, because we needed that, like, that got us
yes,
through this really hard period. But now we're not
absolutely.
in that. Like it's time to, recode it and process it and move through it. And what I love about like somatic work is that it's not like like necessarily have to know what the thing is. Like through breath
Mm,
work, for example, like I have so many clients that, cry and scream or feel all of this emotion. And afterwards they're like, oh my God, I'm like the happiest I've been in years. Like I don't know where this has come from. And I'm like, it goes to show that the body literally, holds it and keeps score. And I think until you actually start activating that part of you, like we don't realize
mm,
how disconnected we are. And I think even, taking it a step further for us women, like we've been conditioned on so many levels to disconnect from our body and, going down a complete different rabbit hole about like, the womb and like
mm,
prana energy and all of that. Like it's literally sacred. Like we
mm,
have the ability to bring life into this world. And I think there's so much, especially for women, that we are taught to disconnect from because it's so powerful.
mm, mm. Yes, I completely agree. I completely agree. And I work mainly with women, and
Mm,
bringing that um, connection to the womb has been so empowering and so
mm,
important for so many people, as well as understanding the cyclical nature of our hormones, our thoughts, the way that like our minds work when we are at certain stages of our periods. It is such an empowering thing to be connected to that.
mm,
Um, and you're right, our whole lives we've kind of been taught that it's like a nuisance, or it's gross, or what have you. And to really tap in and to connect into that beautiful like wave or like cycle of different
mm.
energies that we get through each every stage of the month, it's an incredibly powerful thing as a woman to understand your cycle,
Mm.
um, and to connect into that womb space. Yeah.
And I wish that was something that was taught, in
Mm,
schools or, you know,
I
passed
agree.
down. And maybe our generation of women and mothers, maybe it will be a little bit different. But my mum and I were
Mm,
actually having this conversation the other day, and she said, you know, she's going through menopause at the moment. So that's a whole nother thing, bless
yes.
her.
Another thing that's
Um,
not spoken about enough
no, and
and not
she was saying that
normalized.
as well. She was like, you know, I never knew what was happening in my own body
Yeah.
because, yeah, and, you know, even if she visited like traditional doctors, they would just wanted to get her on this like hormone, like medication to regulate. And she's like, but what's actually happening? And I said to her, like, even though if you stop your bleed, like you still, that's why, you know, a lot of wise women like talk about the moon and the link to
Mm,
the like our menstrual cycle because you still have it energetically, you're still going through those phases even if you're not physically bleeding anymore. And she had no idea like the 4 different stages that women go through at her age, you know. And
yeah.
we were just saying like, wow, it's something that is so natural but like is so taboo, you know.
Mm,
And if we bring it back to somatics, it's like that's just one aspect of how women are taught and conditioned to silently disconnect from their body. You know, we were taught in school just to use like sanitary items and you just don't talk about it and you
mm,
suffer in silence. And, you know, all it like you take Nurofen to numb the like what your body's trying to communicate to you. And
mm,
so for myself personally, like part of my kind of somatic journey of healing has been really connecting to that. Like I switched out to a cup so that I'm actually
mm-hmm.
spending time with my blood instead of just using like a tampon and throwing it away and not even looking at it, you know, like you
Yeah.
said, thinking it's a nuisance.
Mm,
Um, and if we come back to just more in general around somatics and navigating, you know, huge emotions, I would love to know for somebody who is going through something or is maybe feeling that really beautiful pull to kind of work in this space, or they're feeling that kind of fire in your belly, which you often get when like you're hearing something on a podcast or
mm.
on a talk and you're like, oh, this is like speaking to my soul. I don't know why Siri just popped up then. Hello. My little Siri button, sorry. If somebody is feeling this pull, what
Mm.
would you share with them? Or is there something that you would recommend as like a starting point? Because I think with this real deep work, it's all good and well to hear the word somatic healing and to,
Yeah.
you know, hear these conversations, but how do they start actually integrating it?
I think that what they can realize actually is that they're probably already doing somatic work without even knowing it. So, simple things like going on your daily hot girl walk or breathing deeply, or, you know, if you have a spiritual practice that involves grounding or putting your feet on the earth, if you're bringing presence and awareness to your body in any way, you're starting the somatic practice. So for me, like yoga was such a really deepening experience for me to start somatics because, first of all, it's connection to breath. Yogic breath, ujjayi breath is just such a like powerful thing. It gets you out of your head and into your body, and you're really just exploring, like finding what feels good in your body is a really, really powerful home base to start, because we don't want to start moving into the pain points and the fear and the anger and the rage, and the grief and the shame if we don't already have a resource, a home base within ourselves that
Mm.
we can come back to. So I would never invite anyone to just go, if they're feeling shame or if they're feeling anger or rage, just like go straight into it and dial it up and start to feel it at its most intensity straight away without first having had a grounding experience or a resourcing experience where um, they're really deeply connected to a sense of safety within themselves, first of all. And
Mm.
so I actually have some resources on
And
YouTube. I'm not sure if they're visible, but I'll put a link up in my bio. We'll talk about them later. But I've recorded a couple of videos for people to start that exploration.
mm.
One being like a safe memory and how that feels in their body. The other being like a safe character or an icon or loved one, how it feels to be present and with them. And then the third one is like doing a body scan to see where in the body feels the most comfortable, open, expansive to them. And So that would be my advice for starting off this work, this somatic practice, is knowing that you're probably doing it already,
Mm.
and to trust your body's natural instincts in any situation, listening to your body, starting to really tune in and connect in with breath. I just think like you are going to change your life when you start
Mm.
to connect to your body, because there is so much wisdom that lies within. We have the answers to everything. It's
I
pretty cool.
love that. I know. And like, how powerful is that? You know, we
Mm.
always think we need something external,
Hmm.
someone to tell us what to do. And
Yeah.
obviously, you know, we love practitioners, like, we're both
Yeah.
practitioners,
Yeah.
but it is like we only hold the space for our clients to find the answers and the healing. You know, we give you the tools and modalities, but it's you that's doing it. And I really
Mm.
love that you approach this work also connecting to like the other spectrum. You know, we've all seen the TikToks of the breath work where people are screaming and
Yeah.
crying and it's so full on. And I, you know, love that. And there's a place for that and that's beautiful.
Mm.
But I think that also puts a lot of people off because that's so foreign to
Yeah.
what we think, you know, we have access to. And so I
Mm.
really love, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, our feelings are obviously on a spectrum. And I think that we can only experience where we're going to meet ourselves at. So, you know, if you go deep into the anger, the sadness, the shame, the resentment, that's going to then create space for you to be able to experience absolute bliss and joy
Mm.
and love, and
Yeah.
vice versa. So, I really love that approach of connecting in a positive way just to build that relationship. And it is a relationship, you know, it's a two-way
Mm.
relationship where we can communicate to our bodies and our body can also communicate to us. And for so long, like I said before, you know, we numb it by taking pain relief or pushing our body to burnout, and we don't actually, you know, give it the space and the love that it
Mm.
deserves. And something for me, like, is even just showing like compassion to my body and also gratitude, because
Mm.
through my breathwork teacher training, like, we learn a lot about the autonomic nervous system and how there's so much that our body is constantly doing for us, you know, pumping our blood, like getting rid of toxins, like our immune system, everything that we are just plodding along, ignoring, not even realizing that it's like working so hard to protect us. So I think it's really beautiful to even come into that space of like acknowledging your little toe, you know, like it
Yes.
keeps us balanced and,
Yes.
you know, all of the things. Like, it's so, so beautiful. Like, hearing you speak about that, I really love that you approach it from that really beautiful space, as well as going into the
Mm.
deeper emotions as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Like you mentioned about, you know, the TikToks you might see of people going in and getting a big rage release kind of situation. Like that is powerful, but I think like if you're going into a situation like breath work of like, I've got this inside of me and I need to get it out, you don't give yourself the space to integrate, to learn about it, to feel it really like completely in its process. And I think breathwork is an incredible tool. But if the intention is, I want to get out of like this out of me, then we're kind of missing the point, because it is actually just a part of you that's having this feeling, that's having this emotion, that's experiencing this sensation. And if we're creating these parts that we're saying, I don't want this, I reject this anger, I don't want to feel this sadness, I want to get it out, like kind of get it over and done with, then this is when we're creating our shadow side.
Mhm. And that
And
was
yeah.
literally what I wanted to bring into the conversation next. So I'm so glad that it's naturally evolved in the conversation, because I think shadow work and inner child work is, you know, one of the
Mm,
deepest types of work that you can do. And I
yeah.
would love to hear what shadow work is for you and how it can help, you know, develop that connection to yourself when you start accepting those parts of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think shadow work gets a bit of a bad rap, because I think shadow, it has a connotation of the darkness, and I suppose like the way that I think about shadow work is that we have essentially like a whole family of versions or parts of ourselves that live within us, live within our bodies, our minds, and all of these different parts of us have been created throughout like gestation, birth, childhood, teenagehood, and into adulthood, based off the experiences that we've had. And our like main common driver in this life is to feel loved and accepted. Like that's how we feel safe in this lifetime.
Mm.
And so as we're going through life and we have experiences that we kind of are figuring out, like what's going to make me feel safe, what's going to make me feel loved or accepted in this situation, in this scenario. And we're gathering data all the time. And so when we gather the data that if I act this way in this situation, that means that I get rejected or I get ignored or I get yelled at, then we decide that that part of ourselves isn't acceptable and we push them to the side and they become essentially like an orphaned or fragmented part of ourselves. And that's essentially what becomes our shadow. So these little parts of us, they also then have other parts in front of them that are trying to keep them safe. So those are our like defense mechanisms and our the ways that we protect ourselves from feeling, the ways that we numb ourselves out. So there's layers upon layers upon layers of parts of ourselves that are living within. And some might say that I'm describing like a personality disorder, but it's actually just like all of the different versions of ourselves that have the ability to live within us. And our shadow is just really the part of us that we've decided is not acceptable, that we've decided will not get us love, that we've decided is a really shameful part of us that is we've just gone, I don't want to be that person. And so we like push it to the side. We don't allow ourselves to think it. We don't allow ourselves to feel the feelings that are associated with that part. But unfortunately, because these parts live within our bodies, and I believe that our bodies and our unconscious minds are intrinsically linked, they're actually running about like 80% of the programming of our lives. And so that's why we see ourselves repeating the same patterns over and over again and going, why do I keep sabotaging myself? Or why do I keep people pleasing? Or why do I like have this perfectionism thing and it just keeps showing up over and over again? And you can have awareness of it, but still not be able to feel the sensations in your body that are connected to it. And that's why we just keep constantly playing out these patterns over and over again. So when we bring the shadow to the light, that is when things start to heal. We can then bring those parts in and integrate and really allow them and accept them for who they are, why they were there, the great work that they've done at protecting or of keeping us safe or making sure that people loved us. And then choosing new parts, but also honoring and being really gentle and compassionate with them when they do come up, because they keep popping up. That's life. That's this humanness that we're living, this that we're experiencing. So that's what shadow work means to me.
I love that. And there's, so many layers that I think you explained it in such a beautiful way. And I like to think about, my shadow work, like all my shadow side sometimes as like a child or, as my best friend or whoever I relate to. Especially I've got like a 2.5-year-old niece who like I love and adore.
Mm,
And since she came onto earth, like she's been the biggest like mirror and reflector and like permission slip for me as well, because I always think like, what would I say to Frankie if she came to me like with
mm,
this part of her? Like, I would love it and I would tell her that it's safe and that she can be authentically who she wants to be
yes.
and, all of these things. But when it comes to myself, I don't give myself that permission slip or that acceptance. And I think similar to what I shared, like even with me, like moving from the center, it's like we're our biggest critics
Yes.
and no one else is probably even noticing that, but by us constantly resisting it and shaming it and pushing it down, it's just going to make it bigger and bigger. It's like,
Yes.
one of those, I heard the analogy once of like those, like what are they called, the buoys that sit in the
Oh
water and
yeah.
you like push it
Yep.
down and push it down, but it's so weighted that it's just going to come up. And it's like that's
Yep.
literally what our shadow side is. Like the
Yes.
more, we've all heard the quote like what we resist persists.
Mhm.
And it's so
Mhm.
true what you shared about like constantly having the same thing, like the copy and paste partners or the boss
Mm.
that treats you a certain way or, whatever. And I think until you actually sit down, and like you said, it's about with love and grace. Like it's not about shaming that part of you
Mm-mm,
even more.
mm-mm,
And I love what you shared about like having gratitude and compassion to the reason why that shadow part has become a part of you. Like what was it protecting, or what was it doing? Like what was the benefits of that part of you? And then holding space and choosing differently. Like I think again, it's coming back to that personal power piece of like,
mm.
it's like, I think if we can kind of take a step back from being so in our shit, it's like realizing that, which is hard, when you're
Yeah.
in it. Like, I wish it was that easy. But if we can take a step back and actually like look at it with separation
Yeah.
and, analyze it from that place of like, this is data, like, this doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be this like really deep thing, even though it is, but like, okay, I'm acting this way because of XYZ, or maybe you don't even know.
Mm.
Maybe it's like, okay, we've got this thing, but I'm going to choose different. And I think that's the most empowering thing about this work that not a lot of people actually talk about is like you get to just use it as feedback and data, but choose differently. Like, this is a part of me, but I no longer want it to be at the forefront of my behavior. I'm going to choose to recode it and move through it.
Perfect. Yeah, that is the definition of integration right there.
I love it. It's
Mm.
so, so powerful. And kind of switching gears a little
Mm.
bit, you share a lot about softening into rest without guilt. And this is
Mm.
something that I have been navigating personally for a really long time, if I'm being completely honest. Like, as a woman and as a person in business, I find it really, really hard to switch off. I think it's partly because I love my work and my clients, and there's always
Yes.
something you could be doing.
Yes.
But even like I was going through something really, really big in my personal life last week, and I felt like that was the only time that I actually allowed myself to just turn off my phone, like zone out and binge watch like Netflix and
Mm.
just like be in the trenches. But I
Yes.
feel like unless I'm sick or burnt out or going through
Mm.
something, I don't give myself that permission slip. And,
Mm.
last week it was binge watching Netflix, which I'm all here for, but it wasn't productive in the sense of like my well-being and my healing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
I would love to know more about how you have developed this skill or this perspective of resting without guilt.
Mm. I deeply resonate with you there. It's still not easy, but it is the awareness piece I think that comes to me, and I completely agree with, I think, being a business owner, or even being a uni student, you always feel like you have something that you need to like study for or prepare for, or market for, or whatever it might be. And so for me, the way that I've really helped this like happen for me is planning my life around my cycle. So we're coming back to that cyclical living again, is understanding which phase I'm going to be at what stage of the month, and really just honoring, like, for example, the first days of my bleed, I don't book any clients. And those can be those days where I just do switch off my phone and read a book or watch some Netflix or just go for a walk, and try not to invest time and energy into
Mhm.
that kind of creation. There's all these different types of creation that we have access to, and we kind of forget about it, especially when we're business owners, as we're really focused in on like, what can I create for this? It's always
Mm.
for purpose. Um, but I think my biggest like piece with allowing rest and being gentle with myself with rest is, it really is an embodied experience. It really is a connection to knowing, like, when you notice that inner critic coming up, and when you're shooting. So when you are like saying, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have eaten this, I shouldn't have watched that. Like, really just noticing when that comes up, and being really gentle and compassionate with yourself. Like, this is the moment. Okay, I can hear, like, okay, my inner critic, I call her Drusilla, and because it helps me like understand who, like, what's going on here. But I'm like, oh, Drusilla, okay, I hear you. Like, oh, I want to validate you in that. Oh, I get it, where you're coming from. You're really scared right now that you won't have any clients next week, or you'll lose followers on social media, or basically it comes down to survival, right? If you don't have any clients next week, maybe we won't pay the bills, which means we'll get kicked out of our home, which means we'll be homeless. And that's like your biggest fear. And so, like, validating,
Mhm.
getting to the core of that and going, okay, so like, what does rest actually mean? When I'm resting, like actually, is it actually restful?
Mm.
If I am having a go at myself and talking all this shit to myself, like, am I actually resting or am I creating a bigger shame spiral or worry spiral? And so, just having that chat to my inner critic and being really kind and loving to her and going, okay, but like, what do you need so that we can actually rest
Mm.
and you can feel at peace? And sometimes it's just that conversation. She just needed to be heard and reassured. And maybe I need to like check the bank account and be like, hey, babe, there's still some money in here. We're going to be able to pay the rent next week or whatever it is. But
Mhm.
it's just like that the internal dialogue with the parts, with the body, and letting the sensations in the body rise up and just be felt. They really only last for such a short period of time if we allow ourselves to feel them without feeding into the stories.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's a big one. Resting without guilt,
Yes.
finding nice ways to rest that actually does feel good to you. I think sometimes, especially a lot of us who have like really beautiful creative minds, when we go and do the Netflix binge, we really shame ourselves about it
Mhm.
and don't make it okay. And so having a real big permission slip, like, I'm going to intentionally binge 5 hours today of Netflix, and I'm going to allow myself to fully freaking enjoy this and drop
Mm.
in and just let it happen. And then the moment that you think you should be doing something else, like connecting into that and just being really soft and gentle with that part of you. And maybe you
Mm.
do need to get up and do something else, and you could do that, and that's
Mm.
okay.
That's so beautiful. I feel like our whole conversation is obviously like keeps coming back to that like compassion, the self-compassion,
Mm.
the self-love, like honoring your feelings and also that connection to that part of you. And I love I've had like a name for my inner critic for a while as well. I haven't been using it as much lately, but I think it's so beautiful when again you can create that separation of like, oh, it's not me, it's this other part of me,
Yeah.
and it's not who I want to be. And I also think as well, like it comes down to being uncomfortable with being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
notice, like for me personally, it's like, well, why don't I want to slow down? Like, what am I
Mm.
numbing by? I'm
Yeah.
so busy. And like, we all know that just because you're busy doesn't mean you're productive. Like I've had some of the most productive or, most fulfilling or rewarding weeks when I've probably worked the less. Whereas the
Mm.
weeks where I'm like a slave to my desk, it's stagnant and like the content I'm creating is like a flop, or the client sessions I get off and I think, oh, I wasn't on my game. You know what I mean? Like
Mm. Mm.
it doesn't like just because we're busy, it doesn't mean that we're productive. And I find, yeah, for myself, it kind of comes down to two things. It's like, what am I avoiding? What do I not want to slow down in order to like
Yeah.
feel and process? And also my nervous system's a big one. I notice when I'm
Mm-hmm.
constantly like busy or not wanting to rest, it's because I'm in my fight or flight. Like lately, that's a huge thing. I think even if you want to move and no matter how organized you are with moving and stuff, it's always going to be like a little bit dysregulating. And for myself, with the move from the center, because that's very recent, there was a lot of drama with the property manager who came
Mm.
on board, and that just sent me like my fight or flight was activated and I felt on guard the whole time. So for like a good 2 months while I was wrapping up with clients, I was also navigating like this internal just like discomfort of not wanting to
Mm.
like feel and not having time to feel. I'm too busy. I
Yeah.
got to do all these
Yes.
things. And since I've been out of the Sterling Center for 2 weeks now, one of them was obviously a complete write-off, but the first week I was told myself like you can take 2 weeks off of work, and I blocked it out in my
Mm.
calendar. And I
Mm.
noticed that every time someone would message, oh, could you do this, or can we do, yep, absolutely. And I was like, girl, like we booked it out.
Yeah.
And then, I had this big whirlwind of a last week where I was bedridden because of my emotions, and it like wasn't just that one thing, it was grieving of moving, like everything just
Yes.
came all at once. And I
Mm.
noticed for myself as well, even down to like my morning routine, when I am not resting properly, doing my makeup in the morning, I'm eating my breakfast, making my
Yeah.
co like, I have been catching myself, like, the last 2 weeks of, like, "Oh my god, like, we have got nowhere to be, like, why are you
Mm.
rushing?" Or even when I'm driving,
Mm.
like, for example, this morning I was like driving to work with a naturopath that I work with, and I was like driving to her place, and I was like weaving in and out of traffic, and I got there like 15 minutes early, like I was not late,
Yeah.
but I'm like conditioned at the moment. That's my default. Like
Yes.
my default is
Rush.
rushing, and like
Mm.
you're even more clumsy and you're slower when you're rushing, right? And
Yeah.
that's been a huge thing for me as well, is leaning into like the nervous system regulation, because I think that shows up a lot when I don't want to rest.
Yes, yeah. I think that that's like such a huge indicator of like there are parts here or there are feelings here that really just need your attention,
Mm,
really need your attention. And it doesn't need to be, like I said, in my all my stories this week, or I think I did a reel this morning, but like it doesn't need to be this full process. And I think a
mm,
lot of us think that we need to go into a process and set an hour or two aside to like be with our feelings, when it can be so, so simple and so soft and so small. It really doesn't take much to allow the space for things to be acknowledged and to be felt. And if we are noticing like a fight or flight response, like allowing our bodies to have that movement, have that motion that it
mm,
needs. The fight response, maybe want to punch a pillow for a while and breathe deeply. And the flight response loves just having our feet like run on the floor, just in one motion. That it's just like our bodies just want the space to be able to experience those sensations, like completing, like the
mm.
cycle completing. And when we're dissociated and when we're rushing around the world and not actually tuned into our bodies, we miss those cues and we wonder what's going on and what's wrong and why have I like got bruises all over my body,
Mm,
and why am I having a complete burnout meltdown? And it's like just there's so many subtle signs,
mm.
but we miss them because we haven't been taught how to tune into them. We
Yeah.
haven't been like we don't live in a world that supports this. And so
Mm.
it really is up to us to take the reins with our daily rituals and practices, and to make time for just a little embodied check-in every once in a while.
And I love that, because so many of my clients come to me with this preconceived idea that you have to have like a 2 hour morning routine and a 2 hour evening routine, and you've got to meditate 3 times a day, and all of
Mm,
these things. And I always say to my clients, if it's creating this I have to, or like you said before, this should energy, then it's not going to be productive to what you're trying to achieve. And like anything, sometimes it's like lean into some self-discipline. Like, are we
mm,
self-sabotaging? We don't want to go
yeah.
into that. Or is it literally that you can take 3 deep breaths at the traffic lights,
Mm,
or,
mm,
finding these little anchor points throughout your day? For me, my drink bottle is one. Like, I drink so much water, but every time I put my drink bottle back down, I just take a moment of like, how am I
mm,
feeling in this moment? Or, the door frame concept of every time you walk through a door frame, what am I bringing into this new room? What is this
mm.
energy? Like, what am I feeling? How can I choose differently in this moment? And I think it's really beautiful when you can learn to habit stack, so it doesn't feel like
Yes.
this giant big deal that you have to, block out 2 hours and make sure that no one's around so you can scream and you can, we love, I'm here for it, but it
Yes.
also doesn't have to be that deep. Like,
Mm. I,
healing, like some of the most profound healing moments I've had have been in like the little micro moments
yeah.
where I'm like, holy shit, like I was just driving to work and had like the biggest breakthrough, compared to
Mm.
doing like this huge dramatic kind of like ceremony for you, the old version
Yeah.
of you, or whatever it might
Yeah.
be, has its time and place. But if it's between doing that huge thing or just doing something little, like, you can choose to just show up differently today and do something really, really small.
Mm.
And
Mm.
you did an Instagram post that I absolutely loved the other day, which was about self abandonment and
Mm.
how this can lead to feeling ungrounded and disconnected. I would love to bring this into the end of the episode if we can.
Sure. Well, that post came about because self-abandonment is one of my biggest patterns in life. It has just been something that has shown up for me all the way through into my 30s. And it really is rooted in like a sense of low self-worth for me personally, which was inherited, you know, from both of my parents and then from their parents above them. But basically, it's the experiences for me were I was avoiding any kind of difficult conversations, any kind of conflict, boundary setting, because I was so afraid of large emotions coming up.
Mm.
So when we sort of like avoid conflict, it's because we're afraid of other people's either like rage or anger at us or at their um, of their dislike of us, or we're going to get rejected by them. So there's just all this fear around of not being loved. Essentially, it always comes down to the same thing. We just want to feel loved and accepted at our cores, and if we are not doing this work and exploring the shadow and exploring the inner landscapes of our bodies, then it's really, we're not going to experience this sense of self-love that we kind of need to have a foundation of. If we don't know our shadow, our dark sides, if we are pushing parts of us aside, then essentially we're telling ourselves, like, I don't love you, I don't accept you. And weaving this into the self-abandonment stuff, like, we abandon ourselves to find love and acceptance, but then we kind of don't actually feel that because it comes from somewhere else. It's an external thing. It's not really fulfilling. And so when we do the inner work and we start to integrate the shadow and we start to connect to our bodies, there is so much more connection to our emotional bodies there. There's so much more connection to what's happening in our nervous systems, our fight or flight responses. And we realize that our body is just constantly communicating to us. It's constantly sending us messages of, this feels good, this doesn't feel good, this feels safe, this doesn't feel safe, like this really lights me up or this really drains me. And these messages are a signal to us to where we could set our boundaries, or where we could speak up a little bit more, or where we do and don't want to engage in relationship in certain ways. And so the more we connect to our bodies, the less we tend to self-abandon, because we're less afraid of feeling the big emotions. And when we're less afraid of feeling the big emotions, we're less afraid of other people's big emotions as well, because we're feeling really strong and sturdy within ourselves, and we know that we can handle anything that comes at us. And so there's less need to self-abandon when we are deeply rooted and connected to our sense of embodied self.
And that is so powerful. And I think as well, like, it's twofold because, like you said, we're always constantly seeking like love. And then, if we get it with all of these conditions, or, from this place of it's not authentically actually who we are, it's this like social mask of who we think we
Yes.
need to be in order to be loved. Like you said, we're actually not going to be fulfilled because it's like, this isn't like a match for us, because we've been pretending almost this whole entire time. And I think as well, like, obviously we know the standard of like how we love ourselves, and the standard that we love ourselves is what we set for other people to
Yes.
love us as well. And then also, if you are allowing yourself to go into that part of you, then it's also permission slip for other people. Like, I always say to my clients, like, I'm a recovering people pleaser, because I think for me it feels so ingrained in like not who I am, but it feels like such a natural default for me that I have to
Totally.
consciously lean out of that. And I don't think at the moment, with all the work that I'm doing, it's ever just going to be gone. Like, poof,
Yeah.
I'm not a people pleaser anymore. Like, it's my
Yeah.
natural default. And I say that to my clients. I completely just lost what little tangent I was going on. Oh, the permission slip.
Yes.
I like since becoming a recovering people pleaser, I've noticed so many more of like my friends around me. Like if I set a boundary
Mm,
or I
yeah.
say to them, like, I really want to be here for you, but like I've actually had a really full on day with my clients. Like, do you really need me, or could we have this conversation tomorrow? Or like, I want to support you, but I just don't have it in me right now. Like, can
Hmm.
we talk about it another time? And since then, like, I've noticed like other friends have been kind of like doing the same thing to me, which like I love, or vice
Mm,
versa. Like, I've got this one friend who's so grounded in like her own needs that like sometimes she'll leave me on red for like a few days. And like there's this, really beautiful mutual agreement. Like that's fine. She obviously doesn't have the capacity right now to reply. And then so it gives the same permission slip to me. I know she's not going to get shitty if I
mm,
take 2 days to reply. Whereas my other friends who we don't have that kind of permission slip, feel like I have to reply instantly and I have to, be
mm.
switched on all the time. And I think it's really beautiful when you can show up not only for yourself, of course, at the front of it, but also you're being a light and a really beautiful permission slip for other people as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely true. That's absolutely true. I love that. I think the boundaries with friends and boundaries with your phone thing is
Mm,
such an important thing to start to do because whenever in history of life has anyone ever had instant access to us, like as humankind, and now we feel like we're enslaved to like respond to a text message as soon as it comes in,
mm,
otherwise we're rude. And it's like that's not actually the truth. And so to be able to have that beautiful agreement with your friends of I'll get back to you when I can. And I have the same with my friends. One of my friends is always so beautiful. She's like, I don't have the spoons right now, but I'll get back to you. And I was like, babe, you
mm,
just do when you can. That's fine. I actually don't have that expectation of anyone anymore, which is
mm.
it's so nice.
I love that. And I think as well, it links back to like our whole theme of this conversation around like numbing and disconnecting. Cause
Yeah.
I noticed like even this week when I've not like I started really processing what I've been navigating and feeling like the last couple of days. So I'm kind of on the other side of it now. But
Yeah.
at the beginning of the week, I felt just so much like yucky energy because I was glued to my phone. And I
Yes.
had to
Yes.
have like even I was in bed resting, but like was on TikTok or on Instagram or
Mm,
whatever. And I
mm.
had to have this real like talk to myself of like, what is this? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
there's this obviously like this numbing aspect or this trying to find joy outside of myself because I'm really sad right now, all of these things
Yes.
coming up. And like today, for example, it's the first day like properly back into work and my phone has been on silent all day. And like I'm
Mm,
giving myself little, permission slips to like go into it when I feel like I want to, but it's coming from such a beautiful space of like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. I'm going to jump on and like
mm,
check out what everyone's doing on Instagram, not, oh my God, I'm just doom scrolling because I'm numbing and avoiding how I actually feel. So it's even cool down to that point around like getting these subtle cues throughout like
mm,
your daily routine. Like we're such like creatures of habits that it becomes like a default. I know my alarm like goes off, I just scroll and I'm like, what are we doing? Like
mm.
let's
Mm-hmm.
break this habit, so
Yes.
it's cool again bringing that awareness back without judgment of like actually doom scrolling doesn't serve me anymore. I'm gonna not do it and allocate certain times or whatever it might be.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, that's so, so powerful. And like we have to remember as well that our phones are designed to keep us addicted. Like they're
Mm,
designed to give us these dopamine hits constantly, so we keep picking them up and looking at them. And so my favorite tool recently has just been out of sight, out of mind. I put my phone in a drawer in another room, and then suddenly I've got all this space in my head. I've got creativity, I've got ideas
mm,
dropping in. I have like a better sense of self and what it is that I want to create and who I am because I'm not absorbing all of these other ideas and thoughts and stories of what everyone else is doing in their lives. Um, I think it was Jay Shetty had a really great analogy of like when you wake up in the morning and you start scrolling first thing. He was like, could you imagine every single person whose life that you just saw in that, say, like 10 minutes that you were scrolling through their stories in the room with you in the morning? It's like really confronting because you're like, oh my gosh, I've just had all of these people's information just
mm,
coming straight into my mind, into my brain, and into this space with me first thing in the morning.
mm.
So I try to do like an hour of no phone kind of thing first thing if I can because that just scared me. I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
When you
Yeah.
think about that noise, imagine having,
Mhm.
like, that noise first thing. I'm, like, such
Yeah.
a like, a slow like, I'm not a snoozer with my alarm, but, like, my alarm goes off, and then I have a second alarm 15 minutes later, which is, like,
Mhm.
get out of bed. So I just
Mhm.
kinda, like, ponder. I sometimes doom scroll, which we're getting out of the habit, but I
Yep.
kinda, like,
It
ponder life and
happens.
connect to myself and all of the things.
Mm.
But yeah, I've never heard that before, but it's yeah, a confronting thought. So maybe that's what we all kind of need to again jar us back into, wow,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to choose differently.
Mhm.
I
Mm.
could honestly talk to you for like hours and hours and
Me
hours.
too, my love.
And I feel like we've only scratched the surface of like the overlap and the conversations that we're going to have. So I'm sure that we're going to work together in some capacity, whether it's a part
Yes.
two of the potty or maybe I get you to come on my YouTube channel or something like that. Because I would,
Be
yeah,
so great.
love to continue working with you. If the listeners are feeling the same as me, which I'm sure that they are, what are your current offers that you're feeling like lit up about and how can they
Sure.
find you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm doing a couple of new things at the moment. So I've got a new container called Embodied Alchemy. And basically, it's a combination of all of my modalities. Essentially, we're bringing in somatic therapy, combining with holistic counseling, some shadow work stuff, EFT tapping. And it really is just a client centered approach. So basically, whatever it is that the client is, whatever their goals are, whatever they're going through, we create a little bit of a plan and we start to move through some of the things that they've been either blocked with or wanting to like really deeply experience, whether it be healing some level of trauma or yeah, just their goals in life essentially. So it's all about yeah, reconnecting into the body and utilizing those beautiful messages that our emotions are sending us to learn more about what it is, who we are, and what we want. And another thing that doesn't actually have a name yet, but I have been working a lot with business owners, so people like you and I who are, or probably just starting out really in their businesses and have are feeling a little bit overwhelmed and needing clarity and direction and are not connected yet to their voice on social media or feeling really blocked in like showing up online, selling, that kind of thing. So I've just started doing that with a bunch of new clients and it's been feeling really, really good and lighting me up. And I've just realized like how much I love doing that with people. Um, so people can find me on Instagram. It's soul.n for November.soma. Or you could just search Jem, somatic therapist. I think it'll come up there as well. And it's Jem with a J. And otherwise you can find me through Shelby.
Absolutely. And I'll put all
Yeah.
of your details in the show notes as well. So super
Thank you, my
quick
love.
access. And I'm so excited because I've booked in for your beautiful dance therapy
Yes.
healing night in a
Yes.
few weeks,
Amazing.
which is the 29th, I think. So if, yeah, if you want to come and have a boogie, Jem is going to facilitate this really beautiful
Mm.
experience. And I just know for my own healing, like I need it so much. And I've
Yeah.
been like sharing it with all my friends. I think my sister-in-law is going to come as well
Oh my
because we're
God.
all like, yeah, I've just
Amazing.
been hyping you up to everyone and saying how
Awesome.
incredible that's going to be. So, yeah, if you want to join us on the 29th, come have
Awesome.
a little boogie
Thank
and a
you. Oh my
somatic
gosh. And I
experience.
just feel like we've spoken all this time and I haven't mentioned how important dance is
Mm.
to somatics. So it is just like one of the most beautiful and fun and joyous ways that you can
Mm,
connect to your bodies. And yeah, I'm hosting this event at the end of November. So if this is when you're listening to this podcast and you want to come along and you're in South Australia, yeah, the link is in my bio. It'd be so great to have you there. And we're gonna just yeah, drop into our bodies and shake it all out, shake it all in, and feel really beautiful and spaciousness and connected to ourselves at the end. Thank you so
amazing.
much for this.
Thank you for coming. It's been so beautiful and so expansive to just hear your thoughts and the way that teach this incredible work. And I just know the work that you do for yourself and for your clients, it's life changing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, my love.